Search America's polling show that a majority of Americans believe that research is part of the solution to rising healthcare costs. More than half are even willing to pay more taxes, provided it goes to support medical research. Americans understand the value of research. Do our elected officials recognize it as well? Are they willing to accept the decline of our research ecosystem as other countries ramp up their R&D investments? Are they willing to accept other countries taking the lead in science and innovation? Are we willing to accept that? I would guess the answer is no, but this will all come to fruition if they fail to change course. We've got to make them change course. Today's investments in research develop the therapies and cures for tomorrow.
The U.S. is the global leader in innovation. I think we all know that 80% of all the world's research and development in biotech occurs in the United States, but that leadership position is threatened today. We've taken that leadership position, and by the way, that's a reversal from the way things were 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, when more research and development was occurring in this area in Europe than in the United States. We took it because we have an ecosystem that we developed an innovation ecosystem, and that ecosystem requires sound public policy. From the private sector perspective, that includes solid intellectual property protection, a fair, rigorous, transparent regulatory system, market system of healthcare delivery and pricing that offers choice for patients and healthcare providers. But the public sector has a role far beyond just producing sound public policy. As John referenced, public funding for research, which is so threatened today, is absolutely critical to the future, and we care about that as much from the private sector perspective as anybody else does.
I want to start with Margaret Hamburg, the FDA commissioner, an agency that is often portrayed, at least to people like me who read the newspapers, as at odds with the industry. And depending on your perspective, either safeguarding our health or preventing valuable drugs from getting to the market. And I noticed that you recently asked your senior leaders to report back in 3 months on their ideas for adapting the FDA to, quote, the unparalleled challenges and demands of the 21st century. Can you elaborate on those challenges and what kind of reforms you're seeking?
Investments in research are key. We need to make sure that we are adequately investing in research and making the right investments. We have to look at economic policies, we have to look at reimbursement policies, and we have to look at regulatory policies and pathways. The other important aspect of what we're doing at FDA is to really streamline and modernize our systems, our business practices, our ways of engaging with partners so that we are really doing our work as effectively and efficiently as possible so that when a company with a promising drug calls, someone returns the phone call.
So there are ways in which we can partner, and we work together to negotiate some of the changes that were enacted in the last couple of years by Congress that have changed the rules with regard to consultation between the FDA and the industry when approvals or when submissions are pending. The number of approvals has significantly gone up each year in the last several years, and I think there's a lot of agreement around a lot of things and a lot of improvement generally. So I think the environment has changed in the last few years.
What I was going to add, and hopefully a very positive add, is that as part of the new rules and regulations, the FDA has come out with breakthrough therapy indications. And here, for drugs that show extraordinary promise, and not necessarily in a large number of patients, the tables have changed dramatically, where now the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies actually work in partnership to do everything possible to get the drugs to the patients as soon as conceivably possible.
Can you speak about, the sort of the pricing perspective of drugs in this country, and you know, the research that's being done vis-a-vis what's happening globally?
The challenge has been since 2008, 2009, the financial crisis, and so many changes in the world that we've had a risk-off mentality, and that really shook the foundations of biomedical research. Not as many funds for government, not as many funds in academic research, venture capital into startup companies basically drying up, and we were in a crisis in 2010. So by that point, we started to think we have to reinvent the model. And there's a lot of culture and organizational changes still at FDA, but in industry as well. So when you think about pricing then, on one hand, you know, medicine will always cost much to develop. It is going to always be a difficult environment. Much of what we do will never work, and that R&D needs to be paid for. But we also need to be responsible with that, and we see that with the extraordinary prices of rare disease drugs. I'm hopeful with more innovation and more competition that we can have more responsible and more effective pricing as well.
If I were to ask each of you what the top priority is to spur innovation and what the biggest obstacle is, how would you answer that?
When I was training in medical school, a very good place, it was your highest calling to become a medical researcher, to emulate the faculty that was teaching you. And I can remember, even as a resident, sneaking off to the lab to try to get some work done. I even remember Francis carrying the bucket of ice late at night with samples as we were striving to make a contribution in taking what we were learning about basic science and applying that to the care of patients. Today, if you go to medical schools, even top medical schools in the country, you don't consistently see that. The faculty is under such pressure to raise clinical revenue, which is, I think, is a losing proposition for them, but they try, that they're, and the NIH funding, because of the points that Francis and others have made, is so tough that the people training don't see this as a career. And if you lose these kids who are so smart and so talented, who's going to be the next generation that continues to spur on biomedical research and the prevention and cures we seek in this country? The pharmaceutical companies will look everywhere in the world. Trust me. We're not limited. But we want to see, as Americans, the U.S. to continue to be the leaders. And what I'm seeing, because of a variety of factors, we're losing that generation, and that's a real problem.
You mentioned earlier that you were feeling the brunt of sequestration. Can you be specific about how that affects the agency?
We recently passed, it was mentioned, PDUFA 5 was the pharmaceutical drug user fee agreement, part of a broader piece of legislation for the FDA that established some important new programs and activities. But in that, we get an allotment of money, and you know, there's a certain escalation each year as we expand programs and cost of living. Well, in this budget environment, unfortunately, when they're continuing resolutions, it means that we have to be held at one budget level when we have agreed on increases in the budget level. And in addition to our surprise, I think the surprise of Congress as well, surprise of industry too, the user fee dollars are being sequestered at the same level that the budget authority, the government dollars, are being sequestered. So that also is an unexpected and unfortunate hit.